I remember the rain. Not just soft rain, but the kind that blurs the road, pounds the windshield, and makes the world feel like it's crying with you. I was behind the wheel that night, gripping it tighter than I should have. My eyes were tired, but not from driving. From life. From fighting with my parents again. They didn't believe in my dreams. Said I was wasting time. That no real job would ever come from what I was doing. I left the house shaking, angry, and heartbroken. I didn't even take a coat. Just my bag, my car keys, and the storm sitting heavy in my chest. The roads were slick, winding. My phone buzzed with a message, but I didn't look. I just wanted to get away. And then everything happened too fast. A flash of headlights. A sharp turn. My tire slid. The wheel spun out of my hands. The guardrail came out of nowhere. And then, the world flipped. Metal screamed. My own voice, shouting, gasping, was swallowed by wind and rain. And then black. I woke up in a hospital bed. Not a shiny one with beeping machines and soft blankets. No, this one smelled like bleach and rust. The lights flickered. A ceiling fan creaked. I couldn't move much. Everything hurt. My arms were bruised, ribs wrapped tight, head bandaged. The nurse noticed me stir. She was kind. Late 40s maybe. Wore a tired smile. "Oh, honey," she whispered, touching my forehead. "You're finally awake." I blinked. "Where am I?" "Small-town clinic," she said. "We got you after someone found your car at the bottom of a ridge. Took a week to get you stable." A week? No calls? No family? I reached for the side table. My phone was cracked, but working. I dialed Mom. Voicemail. I tried Dad. Nothing. Tried my sister. This number is no longer in service. Something inside me twisted. Maybe they didn't know where I was? Maybe they thought I was in some big city hospital? The nurse brought me soup later. Asked if anyone had come. She looked surprised. "You mean no one's visited?" I nodded slowly. Her voice dropped. "Well, they told us you didn't make it. The report said you passed at the scene." My heart stopped. "What?" She looked nervous now. "That's what the paramedic said. They tagged you as deceased." I swallowed hard. "But I'm here. I'm alive." She leaned closer. "Then you must have come back from the dead, sweetheart." It was supposed to be a joke. But I didn't laugh. That night, when the nurse left and the hallway lights dimmed, I grabbed my phone and searched my name. And there it was. An obituary. My name. My age. A short paragraph about how I lived with purpose and left too soon. It even mentioned the school I graduated from. It was real. Dated last week. I kept scrolling, heart pounding. Then I saw it. A funeral announcement. This Sunday. Location. My childhood church. Time. 11 a.m. Hosted by my parents. I stared at the screen until my hands shook. They thought I was dead. No. They said I was dead. And a funeral was already planned, without even checking if I made it. No one came looking. No one waited. They just moved on. That night, I lay awake in that cold hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, my body aching in places I didn't know existed. But it was nothing compared to the pain rising in my chest. I wasn't just broken from the crash. I was broken from being left behind. And something inside me whispered, "This story isn't over." Not yet. I left the hospital 2 days later. No flowers. No goodbye. Just a discharge form, borrowed clothes from the donation bin, and a plastic bag with my cracked phone inside. The nurse hugged me tight before I left. "You sure you don't want us to call someone?" I shook my head. I didn't have someone. At least not anymore. I hitchhiked back toward the city. A kind trucker gave me a ride and a peanut butter sandwich. He didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. The skyline came into view as the sun started to set. I had no plan, just 100 questions and an ache that went deeper than my bruises. First stop, the bank. I needed cash. Something. Anything to survive a few nights. I walked up to the counter and handed the teller my ID. Just want to pull a little money out, I said. She smiled politely. Then her eyes narrowed. I'm sorry, but this account has been locked. What? I blinked. Why? She leaned closer, lowered her voice. It's marked as inactive. A death certificate was filed. This account is listed under a deceased identity. My hands went cold. But I'm standing right here. She paused. Maybe you should speak to the manager. I walked out instead. My legs felt like jelly. Dead? On paper, I didn't exist. I wandered for hours. The streets looked familiar, but somehow foreign. Like the world had moved on without me. Eventually, I found myself standing in front of my childhood home. Same front porch. Same swing. But something was off. The flower beds were empty. The curtains were different. And the name on the mailbox wasn't ours. I knocked. A woman I didn't recognize opened the door. Can I help you? I used to live here. Is this still the Wallace residence? She shook her head. No, they moved out last week. Said they couldn't stay after their daughter passed. Something about needing a fresh start. My stomach twisted. Do you know where they went? She frowned. Sorry. I didn't ask. I backed away slowly, the front door closing behind me like the final nail in a coffin. They left. Just packed up and left. No one called to confirm I was really gone. No hospital visit. No search. Nothing. I sat on the curb outside the house for a long time, watching cars go by, wondering how easily people can disappear. Later that night, I found a quiet library with free internet and did what I should have done days ago. Looked up every article I could about myself. My name had been mentioned 4 times. Once in the obituary, once in the funeral post, and twice in local financial news. That's where I saw it. Grieving parents receive $2.3 million in life insurance after tragic accident claims daughter's life. There was a picture of them, smiling, holding a check. My mother's hand rested on my father's chest like a trophy had just been won. I stared at the screen, mouth dry, heart racing. They didn't just grieve. They cashed in. My life had a price tag. $2.3 million. And just like that, I understood something that hurt more than the crash ever could. They didn't make a mistake. They made a choice. And this Sunday, they'd be standing in a church, crying over a girl they buried with lies. But I wasn't done. And I wasn't staying dead. The church was exactly how I remembered it. Stone steps worn from years of Sunday shoes, white columns, and the faint smell of wax and lilies drifting from the open doors. It was Sunday morning, my funeral day. I stood across the street, hidden beneath a gray hoodie, scarf pulled up to cover half my face. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear traffic. I kept asking myself, what if I'm wrong? What if this is a dream? But the sign out front erased all doubt. In loving memory of Amelia Wallace, 1998 to 2025. That was me. I crossed the street slowly, each step heavy. I walked through those doors and into a world where I didn't exist. The pews were half full. Familiar faces blurred together. Neighbors, distant relatives, people who hadn't spoken to me in years now pretending to mourn. A giant framed photo of me stood at the front, next to a closed casket. It was my college graduation picture, the last one my mom had ever liked. The room was quiet, except for soft sniffles and a hymn playing low in the background. I kept to the back, head down, eyes locked on the couple at the front row. My parents. My mother wore all black, veil, gloves, pearls. A perfect grieving widow, except she wasn't a widow. She was a liar. My father sat stiff beside her, hand resting on her knee. He wasn't crying, just nodding quietly to each person who came by to offer condolences. Then someone caught my eye. My cousin Jenna. She sat a few rows back, whispering to a guy next to her. At least they can finally pay off their mortgage, she muttered. I froze. That's what I was worth to them. A clean house, a new life, and $2.3 million in blood money. I started walking down the center aisle. One step, then another. People turned. Whispers rose. Gasps echoed through the silence. But I didn't stop. My mother looked up first, eyes wide, mouth open. Her face went white. Then my father stood, so fast his chair scraped across the wooden floor. The priest stuttered, confused. Excuse me, ma'am, this is a private. I am the guest of honor, I said, my voice sharp. After all, it's my funeral. Dead silence. Someone in the front row dropped their program. It fluttered to the floor like a leaf. My mother clutched her chest. Amelia, how you're supposed to be dead? I finished for her.
Yeah.
I figured that out when no one came to the hospital, or answered my calls, or cared enough to check if I was breathing before collecting my insurance. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. I turned to the room. To everyone here, thank you for coming to mourn a death that never happened. While I laid alone in a hospital bed, my parents were filing forms and smiling for photos. The crowd shifted. Uneasy. My father stepped forward. Sweetheart, we were told you didn't make it. It was a misunderstanding. We thought. Stop. My eyes locked on his. You never called the hospital. Never tried to confirm. You wanted me gone. So you made it real on paper. My mother looked ready to faint. We needed closure. No, I said, voice low. You needed money. Suddenly, a voice from the side spoke up. I'd like a word with you after the service. Everyone turned. A tall man in a navy suit stood near the aisle. I didn't know him, but the logo on his folder said Ellison and Rowe Law, our grandfather's estate attorneys. My parents paled in sync. He nodded at me gently. Miss Wallace, I've been looking for you. I didn't smile, but something deep inside me shifted. The truth had cracked open, and nothing, not a fake obituary, not even $2.3 million, could bury me now. I turned back to my parents and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, you buried a lie, but I'm still here, and I'm not leaving quietly. You'd think after crashing my own funeral, the truth would explode like a firework. But instead, the room went dead quiet. No one clapped. No one moved. All eyes were on my parents, and their expressions said everything. My mother was frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she was underwater. She looked like someone had ripped the floor out from under her. Her veil had slipped, showing the shock on her face in full view. My father, he didn't blink. He just stared at me like I was some ghost that crawled out of the casket. For a second, I almost expected him to reach out, touch me to see if I was real. But he didn't. He stepped back. That told me more than his words ever could. The guests were whispering now. Some stood up. A woman gasped. An older man muttered something about fraud under his breath. I could feel it shifting. Their perfect illusion, cracking piece by piece. The priest looked lost. I think we need to pause the service. No, I said firmly. We're not pausing anything. Not until the truth is out. I walked straight toward the front, past pews full of confused and horrified faces. When I reached the pulpit, I turned to face them all. This is not a story of grief, I said. This is a story of greed. I held up the funeral program. My name, my face. They printed this, wrote this, posted it online. They collected money on the lie that I died. I turned to the back corner, where the lawyer still stood watching quietly. Ask Mr. Ellison. Ask the bank. Ask the insurance company. Everything's documented. My father finally found his voice. We didn't know. The coroner told us. Stop lying, I snapped. You never came to the hospital. You never waited for identification. You just signed the papers and ran to the insurance office. My mom clutched the side of the pew, whispering, "We were told it was you." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, you hoped it was me." The room fell silent again. That was the moment it truly landed. They didn't fight back. They didn't rush up to hug me, to say they were thankful I survived. Because they weren't. The man from Ellison and Rowe stepped forward finally. "Miss Wallace," he said clearly, "we've been searching for you since your accident. Your grandfather's estate had a clause that depended on you reaching age 25. And since your supposed death occurred the week before, your parents requested all assets be redirected." There it was. They didn't just fake my death for sympathy. They did it for inheritance. Over $5 million. Suddenly, people were standing up. Some backed away from my parents. My aunt crossed her arms. My cousin Jenna whispered something and slipped out the side door. It was all unraveling now. My father tried again, voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," I interrupted. "This is justice." I turned back to the crowd. "I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm here for the truth." I paused, then slowly stepped off the pulpit, leaving behind my own obituary on the altar. My footsteps echoed as I walked out of the church, heart pounding in my chest, not with fear, but with something sharper. Control. And for the first time since the crash, I could feel it returning. 2 days after the funeral, I found myself sitting in a quiet office lined with thick law books and dust-covered picture frames. The blinds were half-closed, letting in slivers of gray light. Across from me sat Mr. Ellison, the estate attorney from my grandfather's firm. He placed a thick file on the desk between us. "This," he said, "is everything." I stared at it, unsure if I was ready. But then I remembered my parents' faces in that church. The casket. The money. I nodded. He flipped open the folder and began. "Your grandfather had a clause in his will. A unique one. It stated that you, as the primary beneficiary, would inherit $5 million only if you reached the age of 25. I blinked. "And if I didn't?" He gave me a sad smile. "Then the money would default to your parents. He thought it would encourage them to stay close. To support you." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "Well, that didn't work out." He slid a document across the desk. It was the death certificate, filed 6 days before my birthday. "According to this," he said softly, "you died at 24. I stared at it. My name, my birthday, my fake death. "They knew," I whispered. He nodded. "We believe so. After your accident, your parents never requested formal identification. They rushed the paperwork. And the coroner who signed off," he paused. "He's under investigation now for accepting bribes." I felt the air drain from my lungs. They paid someone to say I was dead. "For both the insurance and the estate," he said. "The timing was too perfect." I sank back in the chair, my body numb. "Why didn't anyone look for me?" I asked. "If there's a question, why not check hospitals?" "We tried," he said gently. "But your parents insisted you were cremated immediately. No remains were traceable. And by the time we began asking questions, they had already moved and changed their numbers." I closed my eyes. They didn't even wait a week. They cremated a body that wasn't mine just to erase any proof. And for what? Money? No, not just money. Control. They wanted to erase me, rewrite the family tree so I no longer existed, take everything I was supposed to have and give it to someone else. "Your sister," I murmured. "Did she know?" He hesitated, then slid another photo across the desk. It was a bank log, a deposit from my grandfather's trust, split between my parents and my sister, just days after my death. So yes, she knew. They all knew. I sat there in silence, staring at the evidence of my erasure. A fake certificate, a money trail, smiling pictures of them with the inheritance they stole. But as the silence stretched, something shifted in me. Not sadness. Not even anger.
Clarity.
They had closed the door on me, but I had just kicked it open. They're going to pay it all back, I said. And more. Ellison nodded. With your permission, we'll start legal proceedings immediately. Fraud, perjury, inheritance theft. It's a long list. I stood up. My legs still ached, but I felt stronger than I had since the crash. They buried me to get rich, I said, gathering the documents. Now it's time to bury their lies. As I stepped out into the cold afternoon air, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a storm they didn't see coming. 1 week later, I stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by microphones, cameras, and strangers holding notepads. The air buzzed with noise, reporters shouting questions, shutters clicking, people whispering my name like it belonged to a legend, not a lie. I was no longer hiding. No more hoodies. No scarf over my face. I wore a black suit.
Clean.
Fitted. My hair pulled back tight, my voice steady. Because today, I wasn't a daughter. I was a witness, a survivor, and a storm walking on 2 legs. Mr. Ellison stood beside me, a calm presence, a wall between me and the chaos. The first reporter leaned forward. Miss Wallace, is it true your parents declared you dead while you were still alive? I took a deep breath.
Yes.
They filed my death certificate after my accident, without confirming anything. They collected $2.3 million in insurance. Then they claimed my grandfather's estate, which should have gone to me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Another voice. And the funeral? I walked into it myself, I said flatly. I sat in the back. I watched my photo beside a casket they pretended was mine. Cameras flashed wildly. What's your goal now? Someone shouted. I looked directly at the lens.
Truth.
Accountability. And to make sure no one ever thinks it's okay to erase someone for money. I pulled out a copy of my death certificate and held it up. This is what they used to kill me on paper. Then I pulled out the real medical discharge, dated after the crash. And this is proof that I was alive and ignored. Ellison stepped forward and read the charges being filed. Insurance fraud, estate fraud, identity falsification, conspiracy, and perjury. But I wasn't done. I wasn't just betrayed, I said. I was replaced. I explained the inheritance clause, the timing, the fake cremation. And then I revealed the bank logs, showing my sister accepted a large deposit from the estate. That part got loud. People shouting questions. Reporters dialing phones. News vans rolling in faster than I could count. But through it all, I stayed still. Until one reporter asked, "Will you ever speak to your parents again?" I paused. Then I said clearly, "I already did. I spoke the loudest the day I didn't stay buried." That line made it everywhere, TV, podcasts, headlines. She didn't stay buried. Later that night, my story was trending in every news cycle. My inbox flooded. People reached out from across the country, strangers, survivors, people who'd been lied to, stolen from, erased. And then came the fallout. My sister posted a teary video. She claimed she didn't know the money came from the trust. But one screenshot of her text messages said otherwise. My parents? They were arrested 2 days later, caught trying to flee with what remained of the payout. They looked nothing like the proud couple from the check presentation photo. They looked small, cornered, exposed. Exactly how I felt the day I stood outside my childhood home, forgotten. Only now the world saw them for what they were. And me? I wasn't invisible anymore. I was undeniably alive, and I was just getting started. The day after the press storm, I visited the house I once called home. It was empty now. The police had already come and gone. Everything left behind was boxed or broken. A foreclosure notice hung crooked on the door. Still, I walked in. The smell hit me first, stale air, old dust, and something sour like spoiled plans. I moved slowly through the hallway. My footsteps echoed against the floor. The walls were bare, where family photos used to hang. Only the hooks remained, like little question marks drilled into the past. In the living room, I found an open drawer. Inside were birthday cards I had made as a kid. One had a crayon drawing of me holding hands with my parents. It read, "I love you even when you don't see me." I sat down and stared at that line. Even when you don't see me. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I was past the tears now. This house, this family, they didn't just betray me. They tried to delete me. And the saddest part? I still missed the version of them I thought they were. In the backyard, I found the old fire pit. It hadn't been used in years. I gathered a few old photo albums, letters, and the drawing. I lit a match, watched the pages curl, turn black, and disappear. Not out of hate, but because I needed to let it all go. The begging, the waiting, the hope that maybe they'd change. They never would. I wasn't their daughter anymore. Not by blood, not by name, not by choice. And I meant that literally. The next morning, I went to the courthouse and filed for a legal name change. I dropped Wallace. Took my grandmother's maiden name instead, Hartley. The woman who always believed in me, even when I was just a quiet kid with wild dreams and no voice at the dinner table. I signed the paperwork with steady hands. When the clerk handed it back, she smiled. Starting over? I nodded. Starting real. On my way out, I passed a girl around 16 sitting on a bench with her head down, wiping tears with her sleeve. She looked up at me. I saw myself in her. So I sat down beside her. I didn't ask her story. I didn't need to. I just said, "You matter." Even if no one's saying it right now. Her eyes welled up, and she nodded. Sometimes that's all we need. One person to say we're still here. Still human. That night, I wrote a letter. To my parents. But I never planned to send it. It said, "You didn't just fake my death. You killed the version of me that still trusted you." But what rose from that funeral was someone stronger, colder, freer. I'm not your daughter anymore. And you are no longer my home. I folded the letter, tucked it in a drawer, and never looked at it again. Because by then, I had already chosen the next chapter of my life. One where I no longer lived in their shadow. One where I finally stood in my own light. 1 year later, I stood on the rooftop of a building that I owned. The wind was cold, but I didn't feel it. Below me, the city pulsed with life. Cars honking, lights blinking, 1,000 people living stories I'd never know. And above me, the sky was open and endless. For once, I didn't feel small beneath it. So much had changed. The insurance money had been revoked. The estate returned. My parents were awaiting trial. My sister moved across the country and hadn't posted online since.
But none of that mattered now.
Because I wasn't living for revenge anymore. I was living for me. I used part of the inheritance to fund something I'd dreamed of since I was 16, my own company. A wellness startup for girls who felt invisible. Girls who got told, "You're too much," or "not enough." Girls like I used to be. We called it Still Here. And people listened. My story had gone viral, sure. But it was the after that mattered most. The way I rebuilt piece by piece with no blueprint, no backup plan, just truth. Now I had an apartment with big windows and no ghosts in the corners. I had a fridge filled with food I actually liked. And I had peace. Not every day,
But most.
sometimes I still woke up from dreams of being trapped in that hospital bed. Alone. Forgotten. But then I'd see the scarf hanging on my wall, the one I wore to my own funeral. I kept it. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a trophy. Proof that I walked into the fire they lit for me and stepped out without burning. That morning, I made myself coffee, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. The documentary was finally live. Titled, Erased, The Girl Who Walked into Her Own Funeral. I watched the first few minutes, my voice narrating over grainy funeral footage, news clips, quiet shots of hospital corridors. But I paused before the ending. I didn't need to watch it all. I lived it. I closed the laptop and looked outside. Down on the street, two teenage girls were laughing, taking selfies. Carefree.
Loud.
I smiled. Let them be loud. Because I spent too long being silent. Too long begging to be seen. Too long trying to prove I mattered to people who already decided I didn't.
Now?
I didn't ask for permission anymore. I didn't wait for love that had to be earned. I was love. I was proof. I was the girl they tried to bury.
But I bloomed anyway.
The world would remember me not for how I almost died, but for how I refused to stay dead.